This is the House of Hockey podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network. Hockey is more than a game, it's a lifestyle. It's you, the diehard supportive fans, your favorite players who are on the team you cheer for, and the organization who supports them.
The companies that make your gear, bags, and beer league sweaters. The hockey moms and hockey dads, and everything else that makes this House of Hockey your home. Come on in. I'm Breezy.
And I'm Rae Rae.
And this is our house.
Welcome to the House of Hockey podcast. It is episode 110 and 10. 110. I am Rae Rae.
And I'm Breezy.
And this episode, we have one of the guests that we have been promising you over the last few weeks that we've been working on getting on the books. And we talked to Piper Shaw. She is a TV host and reporter that works for Root Sports Northwest. That's sort of like the Fox Sports, Bally Sports, etc. for the Northwest of the United States. And she covers the Seattle Kraken. And she gave us such incredible insight on so many different things.
Yes, not just the Kraken.
Yeah.
It was Minnesota. She's from Minnesota, so we tapped into Ray's famous Minnesota Wild that she thinks nobody talks about ever. So we made sure to talk about them a lot. And we had some super, super great detailed responses from Piper. We learned a lot about Seattle as well and the Kraken.
And the fans. She really gave us a good insight on that fan base and how the team is so responsive to the fan base and how like all of it's based around them. Great analysis of the Kraken as a whole, like their team currently and how they can look to improve in the years and sort of how the team ended up being how they are this year and how their season ended up playing out because of a number of factors. We talked about so much great insight about the players, some of the players and their personalities, which I geek out over. You're going to love this conversation with her. She's a super smart hockey reporter. She knows her stuff. She knows her hockey. You're going to be in for a real treat.
Well, I don't really have anything too crazy. I was just interested in a couple different topics the other day. So I Googled, first of all, if there is a number that only one player wears in the NHL currently, could you take any guesses on if there's only one number and what that number could be? Because there is only one number. Did I word that right? That's weird.
Yeah, like the number on their jersey, the player's number, their player jersey number. There's only
one
current player in the whole league who wears this specific number.
Yes.
I'm going to guess one.
Okay.
That's my guess. What's the answer?
Number one?
Yeah.
Oh, no. There's like 5 people that wear the number one.
Who?
I mean, I could really look at it and give you a breakdown.
All right, fine. What's the number?
87. Sidney Crosby is the only person wearing the number 87.
I feel like I knew that.
Yeah.
But he's the only player.
He's the only player. And it's funny.
Is that like a rule? Like nobody else is allowed to wear 87 on any other team?
I mean, it'll probably end up being retired like Gretzky, right? I mean, no one else will probably wear the number 87 in the league. But I thought there might be other numbers that are either not worn or may only have one current player that wears it. But every other number seems to have 2 to like 10 other players that are wearing the number. So I just thought that was super interesting.
That is very
something
interesting.
Else that's super interesting is I'm currently taking like a nutrition class, right? So I was like, I wonder if any current NHL players are following a specific diet. And there's only one current player, I think it's current, that follows a vegan diet. Could you guess who is the only player on a vegan diet right now? Again, it could have changed, but as far as I know, I think it's still active.
My first thought was Connor McDavid, like that he would be like very forward thinking and like, let me try this and see how this makes me play better.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like that's probably not the answer, and it's probably very obvious. So what is it?
I don't think it's very obvious.
Oh, okay. Who is it?
Zdeno Chara.
What?
Yeah. I read that and I was like,
Chara is vegan?
really? Apparently he's vegan. He came up on my search. He probably may not be now. I think he still is, so obviously don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure I know he is the only one that is coming up as being a vegan in the NHL right now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what I got. I played tourist in my local town this weekend. A friend of mine came up to visit, and we did all the touristy things and had a nice time. And that's all I got.
Very cool.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, I'm good.
You got to study. You got finals. Oh my God, Breezy's got to go, and she's hungry. Here's our interview with Piper. Enjoy, everybody. This week's episode of the House of Hockey podcast is brought to you by hockey fans. Feel the action on the ice like never before with DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NHL. Right now, new customers can bet just $1 on any team to win and get $150 in free bets if they do. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state, you can still hit the ice for cold hard cash. New customers can make their first deposit and play free for thousands with DraftKings daily fantasy hockey contests. Draft your lineup of 8 skaters and a goalie and rack up points for goals, assists, saves, and more. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. That's THPN for the Hockey Podcast Network. Bet just $1 on any NHL team to win and get $150 in free bets if they do. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NHL. 21 and over. Restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
Welcome to the House of Hockey podcast. Piper Shaw, who covers the Seattle Kraken. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So tell everybody basically who you are, what you do, what you cover, where you came from. Give us the old time lapse of it.
Oh, the old time lapse. Where to begin?
Like the 60-second time lapse, the short one.
So I'm from St. Cloud, Minnesota, originally, born and raised there, and I went to college there. And if you're not familiar with St. Cloud, Minnesota, there's not a lot there other than a college hockey team. And the whole state of Minnesota is obviously the state of hockey, where hockey is literally just a part of everyday life. My high school was on a lake. We played hockey in gym class on the lake. Like, it's just like part of the whole thing. So anyways, I went to school for broadcasting. I had my first job working in local news in Madison, Wisconsin, TV news. And there was an opportunity to move into the sideline role or rinkside role for the Wisconsin Badgers hockey team, which was for Fox Sports Wisconsin, which is like the sister network of Fox Sports North, which is the network in Minnesota that I grew up watching, knew people at, et cetera, et cetera. So I moved into that role and I covered more than just hockey for them. I covered all the high school sports, but then I also would cover a lot of stuff at Marquette, which is part of the Big East Conference, but is in Wisconsin, which nobody really considers the East, but it is what it is. And anyways, after I was there for 3.5-ish seasons, I really, really wanted to go work for an NHL team. But I specifically, when I found out Seattle was getting a new hockey team, like I was like, I want to go work for that team. So then I spent 2.5 years trying to figure out how I could get there, and I'm here. So now I work for Root Sports, which is the network here in the Pacific Northwest, the regional sports network, and we cover the Seattle Kraken.
Wow, awesome! Quite the little adventure there for you.
Yeah. Okay, why Seattle? Why the Kraken? Why the new team?
Well, one, it just being a new team is, exciting, of course, but also I always was curious about Seattle because, and then my suspicions were confirmed, but it's kind of similar to Minnesota while also being different. Like it has this whole, up north, big trees, water vibe, hiking, like that whole kind of culture and lifestyle, which is very similar to Minnesota. There are things that are different, but in general, the vibes I knew were going to be similar. And also, this isn't the most important thing in the world, but my husband played hockey and he loves hockey, but he does not want to move anywhere where it is not cold half the year. And for him, when we're talking about markets that he would be willing to move to, New York out of the question, Florida out of the question, Arizona out of the question, Vegas out of the question, Texas out of the question. So he was like, Canada, Columbus, like we could go to Detroit, so that also helped that it was the kind, it's the kind of environment that he also wanted to be in and that we're relatively adjusted to. So
nice. And what is the team culture fan base like? Describe the Seattle Kraken experience and fans? What is it?
If you ask Todd Lewicki, who's, the head of this team, he spearheaded this entire organization from the beginning. He tells you that this entire organization is about Seattle sports fans, from what they picked for their colors and their branding and their arena. And, they surveyed people constantly, and it's the 32,000 people that put down those deposits for those season tickets. And so they've really built the organization and are still adjusting along the way to how their fans react. Instead of it being like, this is what we want to do, it's like, if our fans don't like that, they will literally read and react. So they've really purposefully built this team to, one, be like progressive in the sports world in the sense of like kind of pushing the envelope of what you've seen in the NHL or in professional sports in general. Even just in terms of like how they use social media, and they've got how they do their merch. They've got all kinds of deals with different, fashion lines and companies so that their merch is unique and interesting, and just all those kinds of things. All of our warm-up jerseys for the Hockey is for Everyone nights are all from local artists. They bring in local bands to all the shows. They just really have tried to make it all about Seattle and what Seattle sports fans like. And so I think that you have this incredible reaction from the fans because it's literally made and built with them in mind.
That's incredible. And the arena itself, there were stories cool. Can you dive into the arena for those that are listening that don't really know?
Yes. So obviously I was not here back in the day in Seattle when it was Key Arena, but it used to be Key Arena. It's in the heart of the Seattle city center. So it's right in the heart of the city. Apparently, from what I've been told, Key Arena is where the Supersonics used to play. But from what I have been told is that Key Arena used to have horrendous acoustics, like was all in all not an ideal event arena for anything, is what I've been told. Never been there, but that's just what I have gathered. But the city, I don't know exactly if it was the city or the state or the county or what, but they deemed the building or the roof on this building to be a historical landmark, meaning that you could not tear it down. So when Seattle was bringing a hockey team here, they knew that they wanted to, build this team in this arena in the city, in the heart of the city. They didn't want to push it out to, a suburb where there's a little bit more land, and Seattle's extremely developed. Because we're between water and mountains, like there's really no open space left in the city limits here. So anyways, they had to suspend this roof and dig underneath it through a pandemic for, 3-4 years. They're working on this project. Ended up being well over $1 billion to do this. But not only have they been able to restore the roof, but they've kind of completely changed the landscape around what the arena used to be. And it's called Climate Pledge Arena. It's the world's first carbon neutral. There's a specific phrasing around it, but basically carbon zero, carbon net neutral, whatever it is.
One of those things.
Yeah, it's something like that. Arena.
So wait, is that why it's underground? Was because of the roof situation?
No, I don't think that it's underground because of that. I think it was
Okay.
just needing the room because they couldn't build out at all.
Okay.
I believe. But yeah, it
Okay.
didn't used to be a subterranean arena to my knowledge. And there's still, but yeah, the ice is literally underground. So when you go to the arena, like the elevator says lower level 1, lower level 2, lower level 3, lower level 4, and then like 1 is like the top level. So it's a little confusing if you don't quite understand it doesn't feel like you're like underground. So it's just it's different. But there's also, I mean, they've done so much in that place. I could talk about the arena alone for so long. Like they don't have any single use plastics. There's everything is like compostable, or like the cups if you buy a beer are metal. It's all, they've got some of the best food. They have some local like Seattle kind of chain restaurants in there. They got one of Shaq's chicken places in there. Their flagship team store is so cool. Even the ice, like the ice is made of Seattle rainwater. They have this whole system in there where they gather rain in Seattle and they turn it into the ice. So like, and that's just, I'm not even scratching the surface. Like, it's incredible.
I mean, it makes sense that it's underground, obviously, for the Kraken. But I've heard, I've never been to Seattle, but I've heard that there's a lot of underground, and we're not just talking about underground music here, but like underground, like tunnels where you can do like whiskey tasting and stuff like that. I mean, is that true?
I have not done it, but I have been made aware of that. Like there's lots of little speakeasies. I know that a big tourist thing is there's the Seattle Underground Tour. There's like some tunnels through some neighborhoods. I don't know exactly why or for sure what the significance is, but you're definitely right, Breezy. Like there's definitely underground things here. Lots of, I mean, I've been to shows that are at venues where you go like two levels below to some basement, and that's where the band's gonna be, and you're like, all right.
So again, it all
grunge vibe.
It all ties back into the Seattle thing to have it underground, whether it was meant to be or not.
Yeah,
I guess so. Yeah.
So how would you describe the fans then? Like they like local music, obviously, they are eco-conscious. But when they're in the arena, like, are they chanting? Are they just responding to what the like PA guy is playing, like let's go Kraken, like what is that sort of experience in there? Are they really loud? Are they banging on the glass? Or like what's their vibe? Because there are so many different fan personalities throughout the league.
Yeah, definitely. Multiple things here. One of the things is that hockey is new to a lot of fans in Seattle. Right. So I know that one slight gripe that old hockey fans have had with some of the new hockey fans is that some of the fans don't necessarily understand like hockey arena etiquette or culture necessarily. So like not getting up until there's a whistle, like not getting up from your chairs until there's a whistle. That's been like a thing I see all the time of people being like upset because people just don't know. I don't know that there's a lot, like I wouldn't say that they know or that I hear necessarily a ton of like the traditional hockey chants. Like you don't hear them chanting like Siv, 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 or, that kind of stuff. But they definitely, there's like the, Lithium is the goal song and they'll cheer, let's go Kraken. And so I also think though, the team is still figuring out what kind of chants and what kind of branding, they want to disperse into the fan base, and the fans will find their stuff. You know how during the national anthem, a lot of fan bases will have like one word that they'll shout out. I've heard multiple times fans trying to pick what they want like their thing to be. So you'll hear random words just like get shouted, but nobody's quite on the same page yet. Like red glare is one that people love to like the Rockets red glare because the Kraken's logo has that eye. There's a couple other ones I can't remember off the top of my head. So I think they're still just figuring it out. I mean, I think the arena is so loud. People definitely scream. They definitely cheer. The acoustics in that place are probably the best in the world because they built it to be like that. I've seen some shows there and they like some music concerts and they've been just incredible. So I'm sure that those acoustics help with the noise level, but Yeah, they've been great. And even if fans don't necessarily, like, they're not lifelong hockey fans, or they don't necessarily know exactly what's happening the entire time during the game, they're still into it. And more than anything, they're still passionate and trying to learn. Like, they've just literally dove headfirst. So that's also great to see.
What's been your highlight, most memorable, incredible piece of this inaugural season experience for you?
Well, there's multiple different aspects that have been highlights, like in different ways, like in terms of like my career or just getting to see things like in the city and with the team. Like, there's lots of just different things. But for me, this is my first time covering an NHL team beyond just following it. This is my first time actually having to like really dig in and build relationships like with an NHL PR staff and coaching staff and players and stuff. And so for me, that's been not necessarily a huge learning experience, because it's mostly the same as college hockey, and college sports is just like an extra level kind of up, and people are getting paid to be there, and so there's like a little bit more serious there. And but also, since it's the first year of everything, everybody else is kind of figuring out that stuff too. But I would say, I mean, in terms of just like a really cool thing to get to be a part of, having Mark Giordano as like the first captain of the team, and his silver stick ceremony and all of that, and just getting to know him, even though he's now with the Leafs. That's just cool, as somebody who, grew up watching hockey and getting to, meet some of the players that I was aware of as a teenager and stuff like that, like Jordan Eberle. And so that's been cool. And another highlight for me too has just been getting to see players that I covered when they were in college in the NHL. Like when Keandre Miller, who plays for the Rangers, when he was like in town, I was just like walking down the hallway and I passed him and he was like, "Piper, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "I work here." And he was like, "What?" And it's just like, so that's been kind of like a highlight. And like Cole Caulfield and like a couple of the other guys that like I covered when they were teenagers, like that's just been fun to get to see them grow into these roles, I would say. But I don't know, there's too many highlights to even share.
Tell us a little bit then about the team, the players, like who's the funny guy, who's the prankster, who's the DJ, who's the hype man. Like, give us a little insight into your personal experience with the people you've talked to and what you can share.
Yeah. So one thing I'll say just right off the bat is that we haven't had necessarily a traditional experience in terms of getting to really know the guys a lot because of COVID. Like, we still can't go in the locker room. We haven't been able to be in the locker room at all the entire season. And a lot of our everything has still been very like social distanced. And that's not just like for the TV network, that's like for everybody and like a lot of the staff and stuff. So we haven't gotten to spend as much time really just sitting down and like chatting with them as humans, maybe as we would traditionally get to or would like to. So we're looking forward to having that next year. But I would say that, I mean, I still have talked to most all of them several times, obviously. When I've asked the guys who the goofiest guy on the team is, at first, who he's no longer on the team, but people used to say Nathan Bastian without hesitation. He's not on the team anymore. Now people tend to say Will Borgen, but also Joey Decord is just an absolute delight, an absolute character. He's obviously the our goaltender that we pull up from the Charlotte Checkers to play if Drieger or Grubauer is injured. He also he just won AHL goaltender of the month, and he is like absolutely killing it. So nice. Good for him. But every time he comes up to the big club, the Kraken's like media team, they're like trying to get all the content from Joey that they can, because he's just such a character. I've been told, I believe people say that like Tanev's not in the locker room. Brandon Tanev's not in the locker room a ton anymore since being injured. But I remember that people used to say that he liked to be the DJ, and he always had some new tunes. Yeah, I know that one of my favorite things about Chris Drieger is that he told me Blink-182 is his favorite musical artist, and his favorite genre is like early pop punk 2000s music, and that resonates with me. So I like that. Riley Shahan's really cool. He plays a guitar and he writes music, and he's really into like like folk music singer songwriter. He's got his own podcast where he talks a lot about like mental health, and that's really important to him. And I think that's cool too. Just like he's a professional hockey player, but he's also a dad, and he also has his like side project of his, you know, his passion for talking about mental health and his podcast, and he makes music, and there's a lot going on there. So,
you know, the way the sport has been for so long, we don't always get to hear these things about the players and develop more of a connection as a fan with them, right? Like then you like them more or cheer for them more because you're like, oh, I love talking about mental health. You know, these things, I think hearing these little things make a big deal to fans in the long run, to giving us a little bit of a glimpse into who these guys who really are, because they are so well versed in, you know, giving the standard hockey answers. At least most of them are.
yeah.
You've got a couple of the guys who are, you know, a little more flexible and can vary their things. So I like hearing these stories.
Yeah, I would say, like, to your point about hockey players typically just being relatively stoic, they tend to say that's been one thing, is like a lot of the media out in this market have never covered hockey before. A lot of them.
So they're like, what?
So
what
like,
is this?
Like the concept of hockey culture and
Yeah.
hockey locker rooms and building relationships with hockey players, it's completely different. And I mean, I know that because I come from the state of hockey, but like it's a completely different kind of athlete archetype. You don't put people in boxes necessarily, but your typical NFL player, MLB player, NBA player, and hockey player, it's hockey players have a whole different vibe. And I'm sure that you are aware of that, but yeah, it's a very different, you're right. It's just a very different culture. It's a very humble, quiet, you know, keep your head down kind of sport. Probably because it's a lot of them are Canadian, and that's kind of, you know, the Canadian vibe. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's still truly, I think, a team sport. I mean, so many of the answers, as I'm sure you've heard over your career, are, you know, we, never I. And that's something that Breezy and I both love so much about this sport, and, you know, don't want that change. So we talk about this here a lot of like, where is that balance of getting to know the players a little bit more, but not becoming like, you know, a Kardashian on social media and like, but also keeping that team mentality, right? Because like when the individuality is too much, it takes away from the team and what the history of, you know, that culture is. So
absolutely. And, you know, I would say too, and obviously I'm biased because I love hockey more than any other sport, but in other sports, sometimes having one or two star players like can be enough to carry you to have a really good season. Not the case with hockey. If that were the case with hockey, then the Leafs and the Oilers, they would be crushing it season after season, but they're not. Like,
thank you. That's the argument I say over and over, Piper, and I get shit on all the time by Breezy. I'm like, they're not going to win a Stanley Cup because you can't have two players on your team that are great.
Yeah, like, I mean, and again, I'm biased, and I Austin Matthews and, you know, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid and Mitch Marner, like, they are all fantastic athletes. Like, they are literally like some of the best in this game, undoubtedly. Like, that's not an argument. But you look at teams that are winning games always, and it's because they've got 4, 5, 6 guys that are all right about the same, and even more importantly than that, have chemistry. And that's another thing about this sport, you know, like you're saying, team sport, you need that chemistry, and you need to be able to, like, the Kraken just played the Minnesota Wild the other day. Talk about a team that is just overflowing with chemistry is the Minnesota Wild, and star power. Like of course, Kirill Kaprizov is an incredible hockey player, but you look at Kevin Fiala, you look at Matt Zuccarello, like they are all just contributing, like, all throughout the lineup, just full depth. And yes, you have those two guys who can finish those plays, but yeah, anyways, I'm just, and you just look at just no look passes all over, just the vision, the chemistry. It's obvious, especially if you have an eye for hockey versus when you're, when you see guys try to like bank a pass off the wall, no one's there. Like it's just a whole different sport. You can't just have one star. Anyways, I could go on about that forever.
No, thank you. I'm just so glad that I am not just going off on this repeatedly saying that all the time, and that Breezy too, though, we do talk about the chemistry and how important that is. Can you talk now? Are the dogs done barking?
Well, I've been fighting with my dog's mom, or my dog's mom. What am I talking about? My
Your
mom's
dog's mom?
dog. No,
Oh,
I've been fighting with my mom's dog all day. He just is the loudest breather. He's a little bit older, so he's like not supposed to come upstairs, and he keeps coming upstairs, and then he keeps barking at God knows what. So hopefully he doesn't bark, but if he does, I'll mute myself again. Anyway, what was I going to say? I don't know. Now I'm distracted.
Defending your Leafs, perhaps.
defending the Leafs.
Oh gosh. I mean, there's definitely more than just two good players on the Leafs. We'll say that, but no. I mean, they do have they do have some chemistry, and I think it's gotten better over the last couple of years. But there he goes again. I still don't know if there's like that it factor with them as much as like you would want it to be. But I mean, we've talked so many times where it's like a random team will just come out of nowhere, and you're like, where do they come from? Like the Minnesota Wild, where like last year they, what were they really doing that was that well compared to this year where they're like crushing it almost every game. So, yeah, I don't really know what to defend there, but.
You want me to answer that question?
Yeah, go for it.
I think what they were doing was, okay, I am a lifelong Minnesota Wild fan, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I am qualified to make some grand assertion of what their general managers have done through the years. But for as long as I could remember, Ryan Suter and Zach Parise were the franchise players of that team. And from what I had just, this is not confirmed by anybody important in the organization or anything that I'm with now, but like back in the day, they were just turning over GM and head coach, and kind of what we've gathered is that, Suter and Parise were really the ones who were setting the tone and the expectations for that team for so long when they got, when they got rid of them. And then because they already had Kaprizov, but that's, again, you can't just have one star player if the rest of the team isn't on board with what the new dynamic is going to be. They get rid of those two guys, bring in a couple of other guys that complement the players that they already have and that they wanted to keep, like Matt Dumba and Jared Spurgeon. Like they knew that they wanted to make those guys, give them bigger roles in this team. And that's what happened. If you ask me, I think that's what happened is they literally were like, all right, we are closing that book that we hung our hat on for 15 years and we're trying something new.
Yeah.
It is working.
And I think also to kind of piggyback on that, when you have, and I say older guys, but really they're, mid-30s, whatever. When you have those older guys on the team, it's almost like having like a boss who's set in his way where like he doesn't want to change or anything like that. And I don't want to say trim the fat, but you almost have to when it comes to a hockey team, because you need to not have just like a one mindset kind of thing going forward. And to your point exactly, I mean, as soon as I just noticed that as soon as they, those two guys left, it was like a rocket ship just took off. And I think that
Koivu too, which I don't know that he necessarily dictated as much as, even though he was a little bit older, but that's another, long-time franchise player for the team. All three of those head out and something obviously changed.
And used to kind of old school hockey, and with the game changing so much and getting to this cool little, like, you're seeing trick shots here and there. I mean, I don't know if Koivu or Suter,
yeah.
There's too many of them. Too many. Yeah. I don't know how thrilled they would be to see like these crazy shots or, between the leg goals or anything like that. So, and you have to have certain things like that, come into your team, because if you're going to play old school hockey 24/7, like it's not going to work. So obviously there's a reason why the Minnesota Wild are doing well.
Yes.
There you have it.
There you got it.
There's our theory.
Who's your favorite player to interview on the team?
Oof. It depends like what we're talking.
Like after after a win. How about after a win?
Okay, I have multiple angles to this. My person who used to be my favorite person who we traded away was Colin Blackwell, because he always gave you so much insight of hockey, like a hockey answer and a human answer or a team answer. And he would also talk and like genuinely listened to like what the question was. But I would say in general, well, like somebody who's really fun, like Chris Drieger is so fun. He's a great interview. He does answer your questions. He's very honest. And he's a human being. And so I think he's just like a great interview in general, but he's also a goaltender. So like, you don't necessarily talk to him a ton, obviously. I like talking to Yanni Gord a lot. Like he's generally pretty serious, but he can be funny, but he also like, he will give me hockey answers. Like obviously they're professional hockey players. Like they all know this game, but he will actually like, if you just ask, this is not necessarily a good question, but if you ask something like last night I asked him, Drieger has come up with some really big saves, but he's facing a lot of more tough shots than he probably should be right now. What can you guys do defensively to like help him? He will actually tell you like, we should do this, win this battle, like play better on the boards. Like he'll actually like tell you instead of just like, we got to, be harder on pucks or like just like get control of the pace. It's like, okay, but how? Like he will actually give you like a nuts and bolts answer. And so I appreciate that, because it's like, as a reporter asking you a question, it's like, I'm not just trying to like fill TV time necessarily. Like, and I really try to be very deliberate about the questions that I ask in the context of the game. Like, I'm not just trying to just like take up your time. So, and the fans also in Seattle too, like I said, a lot of the fans are still learning the game. And so I really try to ask questions that will get them an answer where they learn something about like, okay, so given the context of what we saw there, here's the question, here's what the remedy to that would be, or whatever it is, or here's why that happened and why they did that well. Like, anyway, so Yanni always gives you a very honest, legit answer, which I appreciate. Yeah, I'm trying to think like if anybody's like extremely fun.
Has anybody pranked you? Are there any pranksters on the team?
There probably are, but nobody's pranked me. We do this thing called a 2-minute minor where like during practice or whatever, I'll put them in the penalty box and we'll like set up all these GoPros in it and we'll like rapid fire silly questions at them to answer.
I like it.
Like I know like this isn't a prank, but just like Jonas Donskoy answered like 4 of the questions like about Pokemon in some way. Like he loves Pokemon, I learned. Philip Grubauer, we just had him a couple weeks ago, and these things have been running in the arena, like, and they're all over. So he hadn't taped his yet, but he'd seen them. So he was like aware. He was aware of them. And I write this little script for them, and they're supposed to say like, hey, Kraken, or it's like, the script is, hey, I'm Philip Grubauer, and I'm serving my 2-minute minor. But he was like, I don't need the script. I'm like, all right, here you go. And he was like, hello, Kraken Nation. My name is Philip Grubauer, and for the first time ever, I'm serving a 2-minute penalty because he's a goaltender. And it was like, this is not what it is. But we were like, he committed to it. He was so enthusiastic about it. We're like, this is better than what I wrote. Yeah. So he's fun. Yesterday, he was asking me about, I had this hat that we just got back from a road trip really late last night. So we were in Dallas yesterday. I was wearing this like blue hat around the traveling party, and we had our camera set up like where you could kind of see the guys coming out of the locker room, and Grubauer didn't play last night. So he was kind of, leading the high five line and whatever. And he's standing behind me. He's like, what happened to your hat? And I was like, oh, like I can't wear it on TV. And he was like, why not? It's a great hat. I was like, because it's like I don't think I have it down here. It's like one of those hats that he always wears, like a kind of a European style, like brim hat. And I was like, all right, I'll let my boss know Gruby wants the hat back. So yeah, he's silly. That's nice. Actually, all 3 of the goaltenders are very silly. So
they usually are. They all have, as we know. When you go on the road, what's been a city that you've loved to visit, food you've had somewhere that's been incredible? Like what's that like when you're at away games? Not in
Yeah,
the arena, I mean, like food, like after the game, like when you're
she's
not
like,
eating in the arena.
I don't know. This arena has a great hot dog.
Right. Like, I like the soft pretzels, the Dallas Stars games.
Yeah.
This is fun.
So one thing I'll say is we have like I'm not the only reporter. We have two reporters, we have two hosts, we have two analysts. So I go on about half of the road trip. So there's a bunch of markets that I haven't gone to yet. But I mean, for me, probably the best one was getting to go to Minnesota on Friday for the first time. Just obviously I'm from there, but that was the first time I ever got to like cover an NHL game in my home state. And it was also against, this electric Minnesota Wild team. And I got to see, people that I watched and mentored under when I was a college student back in the day who still worked for the team and stuff. So like that was just cool. And then like our color analyst, JT Brown, he also is from Minnesota, born and raised, and he played for the Minnesota Wild. He won a national title in that building. And we've got a bunch of players on our team who either played there, played for the Wild, or played for a college there, or are from Minnesota. So that was just really cool for like the whole, and I'm sure, a lot that happens a lot with like the Canadian cities and then Minnesota, because so many of the players and, people are from hockey cities and whatnot. But that was just really cool for, for all of us. Coach Axel asked me, he was like, you got the whole city of St. Cloud here rooting us on. I was like, there's 5 people here. But, so yeah, like I would say that was really cool. Food wise, I'm trying to think, like we're usually not there for very long. We are literally usually there, like maybe we get a meal. And for a lot of this season, we weren't under NHL COVID protocols. We weren't allowed to leave our hotel rooms and we had to order in only. So I'm trying to think, like we got in Buffalo, we got legit buffalo wings. They were basically just like good wings. They didn't change my world or anything, but the home of the wings, that was a thing. I would say that the Detroit Red Wings arena, Little Caesars Arena, their media meal is like apparently it's like the best one in the league. We have like this document going where we all like rank our favorite like media meals in the arenas, and they had so much food and it was all really good. So that was memorable. But
Nice.
There you go.
That's all I got for you.
Is there like a city or an arena that you haven't been to that you're most excited to visit?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think there's a couple. I would really like to go to Tampa, even though it's not a hockey market necessarily. The arena, I mean, the fans after the kind of season they've gotten the last couple of years, obviously, it looks amazing there. And Tampa as a sports market right now is just booming, obviously. So I would love to go there. I know this also isn't, well, I'd love to go to TD Garden for sure. Just like, that's just would be an incredible bucket list. Like gotta do that. And then I also would say probably the Hurricanes, even though that's very random. My family all live in North Carolina now. They live in Wilmington though, which is a ways away, but it would be cool to get to go there, do a game, have my family actually get to be there with me for one. Even though when I'm working, it's very hard to, like, you're working while the game is happening. You can't really just like leave.
Yeah. But they're there. So that's all that matters.
I know those are like really random answers, but
no, they're not. They're your answers. That's
they're
not random. No.
Yeah. I'm like, Montreal will be fine, I guess. But like,
what about talk about some of the differences between covering college hockey and NHL hockey? Like, what's something notably different in either the style of play, the players, coaching? Like, we don't watch a lot of college hockey, so fill us in on some of that maybe.
One of the biggest things in terms of actually doing my job and reporting is that the amount of information available to me is completely different. Like
Mm.
we would kind of get game notes in college hockey with like the really big notes, but not things that were like tracking streaks. And not only in the NHL do we get streaks, but we get all kinds of streaks. Like we'll get like, blocks streaks or career highs or season highs for both teams any night. You get all of the stats and all of the streaks and all of the combinations possible, if that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
College hockey doesn't even really have anymore. This is the first year that it went away, but like a really reliable live stats site anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was covering it, we kind of did, but even just like the stats available to you are just not the same. So that's just been different, generally making my job easier, but just also learning a little bit more about some of these really advanced stats. Like, okay, how relevant is that to like kind of learning the context of like, does that actually matter? Or is that just something that like you can measure for like over time? Like, what does that stat tell you? What is the story of that stat? That's just been different having that available. Mostly in a good way though. And then one of the other things too would be covering college players. Most of them, it was I was kind of the first like media TV reporter that they had worked with. And I was like theirs. Like I was like, I cover your team. So I got to know them very well. And there's only a couple print writers that also would cover, them. And so I was in some cases like their first kind of exposure to doing live TV interviews and like filming content to like fill shows and broadcasts and stuff like that, versus NHL players. Like a lot, I mean, some of them are young and new, but a lot of them, they've been team to team, they've been here, they've done this, they know that guy, so it's just a little bit different too, in just like building a relationship and in the kind of answers you get and in the kind of questions that you can ask. I've had times where I was interviewing 18-year-old hockey players who are really good hockey players, but they've never done a live TV interview in the middle of a game before. So it's just kind of being a shepherd a little bit, like, okay, stand here, like you're going to face here, like I'm going to step away, but it's okay. Like this kind of stuff like that. So but the game's the game, it's it's faster paced, of course. Bigger guys, generally more skill and talent, but college hockey is fun because it's also messy because you got so much like unharnessed skill and talent sometimes in college hockey, where like somebody will make an incredible play and then just completely biff it on like some horrible turnover like the next second because it's college hockey. So and I love that about college hockey, but when the guys are playing for paychecks, it matters a little bit more, obviously.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So we talked to the Kings amateur scout a couple weeks ago, and he said that he has a hard time watching a game as a fan over like a scout because he knows the game so well. So because you have, grown up with the sport so much, like all of your answers that I've noticed are like very like intricate when it comes to like playing the game. Do you often see that it's hard to watch a game as like a fan over like, that you'll probably have to like report on something or like there's things that you're watching? Like, do you have a hard time trying to like find that balance?
It depends on what my level of investment is into said game. Like right. If I actually care about it, or if I actually care or know any of the players or the staff, or, if the result in some way is relevant to me, I would say it depends. It also depends how much I'm like sitting down and watching the game. Sometimes I'll just like turn on some game between two teams that I'm not playing anytime soon, and that we're not playing anytime soon, that I don't necessarily need to know how this game turns out. But sometimes I'll turn it on and like, cook dinner or whatever, and I can easily just like watch it as a fan and just listen and absorb, but my heart's not like a fan, if like an invested fan in the game. So I'm not necessarily, I'm just observing more than caring as a fan, I guess. But I have a hard time watching a Kraken game, obviously, without being invested. I have a hard time watching a Minnesota Wild game as well. This is a little bit different though for me, because even though I'm so excited that they're making this run and stuff, like this team is like the Wild team is almost like foreign to me in a way, because this last year where they've had this whole run and this turnover. I've been over here with the Kraken. I've been, paying attention to what we're doing and building and getting to know these players. So it's been a little bit different. I'm like, who's that guy, on the Wild's roster, which I'm like, what the heck? Cause I, have been following all of the, the trades throughout the years and whatever. So that's a little bit different, but if I care about the game, like there's a couple teams that I like because I got friends who work for them, or I know people who are good friends with the players, or a player that used to, be on our team that I really liked, or, what have you. Like I love watching the Canadians when they're playing well because I'm always cheering for Cole Caulfield and that whole storyline that they've got going on with their coaching change. And like, and I'm sure throughout the years that the players that I covered as teens, and even I went to St. Cloud State with Will Borgen, who plays for the Kraken. I literally went to college with him, and like Dennis Chalowski, I literally went to college with him. So like that's an interesting thing too, is like there's always there's little ties there, and then I'll care a little bit more. But to answer your question, long story short, I don't think I have too hard of a time separating it, but it just kind of depends.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Yeah.
All right. And from your perspective as like an analyst reporter covering the Kraken, what do you think needs to happen in the off season and next season to see a better overall record at the end of the year? Was that the nice enough way to say that? About the team's inaugural season performance?
It's a little bit hard because on a piece of paper, you would think that the Kraken would be doing or would have done better than they have. And even, some of the guys that we traded away at the trade deadline are like really good hockey players. And we've been playing better since the trade deadline. So it's like, you look at guys like Calle Yarncroke, like leaving us, you're like, that's a good, like that was one of our top line guys. Like that's a good hockey player. So you're kind of alarmed seeing, and like seeing Gio go. And like, I really liked the way that Colin Blackwell played, but he was also a free agent. So I get that trade, to the Leafs too and things, but it's been interesting just not fully being on the wavelength of understanding what the thought process is. But now they're playing way better hockey than they were before. So I don't even know that I can necessarily tell you. They got to get some more skill. They have to get some more skill, but even more than that, I think that like now that they've kind of found a lineup that they actually like, or like certain lines and pairs that they have stuck with a couple games in a row, that's been good for them. We just lost to the Stars last night, but they played a really good game and, whatever. But, that's another thing too. Like they were changing the lines, like every game to game. It was like, who's playing tonight? Who's scratched tonight? What's going on tonight? And I get why you got to do that, because you got to blend them up and find something that sticks. Absolutely. Find some chemistry. Who do you guys like playing with? You're all getting to know each other. But that's probably got to be the biggest thing, is just find some skilled guys, find some fast guys. Like they need, Turbo's fast, but he's been out during the season, and you got to have somebody who can keep up with him. He can't just like rip to the other side of the ice and nobody's there to catch his pass. Like, anyways, that's not a very clear answer, but I think they need some more skill and they need some more speed, and they just need some chemistry. And one more note too on the chemistry thing is, and this is what the guys have said a lot, is like because of the COVID, precautions and everything, they haven't really gotten a lot of time to do anything together. Like the team have scheduled very few bonding activities for them. Like they're not banned from, living their lives, but they're generally discouraged from like having a big party together just for obvious reasons. And that's, things are lightening up now, like light a little bit now, but when you got to start your season where you're all wearing masks on a quiet plane, sitting 3 seats away from each other in a foreign locker room, and none of you really know each other at all, and you're all kind of similar-ish skill level guys, you're looking around the room like, who's our star, who's our leader? Like, it's just, I think all of those things are not secrets, and they're figuring it out though. So it'll be good. I have faith. Yeah. Got to make some trades. I got 35 draft picks in the next 3 years. So they got some draft capital. That's what Ron Francis says. He's going to make some trades this summer. We'll see. Yeah.
That's the best part, is like watching it grow. I think that's a much better way, honestly, from a fan's perspective, to start out like this, where they are having to work to find out how these players are truly going to mesh on the ice, and the chemistry and the lines, and making those changes, as opposed to, I mean, everybody, which I think is wrong, expected, I think a lot of people expected them to come out and play like the Golden Knights. And also that was the same, not the same situation, but when they came into the league, right? It's this like blank slate, a bunch of guys on paper. Are they going to mesh? Is this thing going to work? And they just kind of had it. They had the chemistry. They had the other bonding moment of the tragedy that happened in Vegas, and so many other elements played into it. And so I think your explanation was actually spot on and really gave a better perspective, because like, you're right. COVID, they don't get to bond together. They don't get to play cards on the plane next to each other, right? Like, they're not doing these things that they normally do. And that's how you make chemistry, is not just on the ice at practice, but off the ice, in the locker room, on the plane, traveling, like building that connection. So I think that was a really good insight.
Well, and to your point as well, like obviously we get a lot of questions about the comparison to the Golden Knights and such, and what, Ron Francis has pretty candidly said is that, like, they obviously did not make many trades after the expansion draft, versus Vegas made a ton of trades, and they were able to be very active during free agency. That nobody wanted to trade with the Kraken because they didn't want to have another Vegas thing happen. And that is very well established. So if you look at the roster that Vegas initially drafted, like, you're not necessarily looking at that roster thinking that's a star team, but that's not the team. That's not even kind of the team that took the ice in their first game. The Kraken pretty much was the same roster. I mean, we just had Cole Lind, he's a great kid, but he just scored his first NHL goal last month. I think he has 2 or 3 now. We took him in the expansion draft from the Canucks. Like, a lot of the players that, were taken were in not necessarily, like, especially not in Cole's case. He was never intended to be traded, but like, I don't know that when they drafted that team necessarily, the thought was that all of them would be the players that took the ice on the first Kraken game. And most of them ended up being the case. So I also think that's a big difference. Like, yeah, not only the chemistry and, the bonding and everything, and being able to like pick guys who did play with each other before, like Vegas got to do. The Kraken mostly just got what they got and had to work with it. Pick up a couple guys in free agency and call it a day, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also too, you got to think, the current roster that the Kraken have, they're going to be able to grow together, which ultimately after this season, after this whole COVID thing, they should be able to have a really strong bond, and they could be, how Vegas came out super strong, but in like a year or two, because now Vegas, I mean, they may not even make a playoff spot this year. So I think it's going to be exciting. I think the Kraken have a really exciting future ahead of them, because they don't have like a defined star player, at least in my eyes, that it's like these guys can all grow together, and who knows, you could have a star line, 2-star lines that that just come out of nowhere. Because as we know, the game of hockey changes and anything can happen. So I think Seattle, has some potential to be pretty crazy over the next year or two.
Yeah, and even if you look at the trades that like they made at the trade deadline, the team now is different than it was during that first game. It is significantly different now, and they're finding different ways to use guys. And a lot of the players that we picked up they were guys who didn't want to leave the teams that they were with, like Victor Rask and Daniel Sprong, and both of them have been great for the Kraken. And another thing too, I mean, obviously you look at like the total points that the team has, and the performance overall, and you don't necessarily think like, wow, good for them. But a lot of the players are setting insane career highs in things like, okay, Carson Soucy, for example, he was always like pretty solid defenseman for the Minnesota Wild, but he played I think he was there for 4 seasons, and he had 31 points there his whole time that he was there. He's already got 20. He's already set a new career, or he's already set a new season high in assists, in shorthanded goals, and in goals. And Jared McCann and I can't even give you the list because there's 8 of them or 9 of them who have already set career highs in assists and in goals and in hits and in all of the things, because it's an inherent opportunity when you have to step up and play. And so it's you look at, Yanni Gourde just scored his 100th career goal last night, which is a huge milestone for him. He's an undrafted player. But then when you think, well, Kirill Kaprizov just hit 100 points this season, you're like, oh, whatever. But it's a whole different scale and the kind of roles that these guys used to play with the teams that they were with for a long time versus the roles that they're being asked to play now. It's a whole opportunity. And that's what they'll tell you as well. It's just a whole different hockey game for them, really.
Yeah. I think we should hit her with our rapid fire final 3.
All right, go for it.
Who is your ultimate hockey hunk?
I don't know. I guess I would say just growing up, it was always Zach Parise. I'm sure nowadays there's better looking people. I don't know. But as a teen, it was always Zach Parise. If you were a hockey fan of Minnesota, that's your boy.
So we're going to just pretend you didn't say your husband.
Oh,
right.
Well, that's true. Yeah. He would probably agree with Zach Parise. His hockey hunk is Carson Soucy. He loves Carson Soucy, but mostly it kind of became it's like a bit now, but like a joke. But he does like Carson Soucy.
Nice.
Oh, that's funny. And who is your favorite hocky lady?
Okay, can I have 2 or no?
Yeah,
of course. There's not really any rules
if you want,
other than you have to answer.
My first one would be Cami Granato, because she's just a legend. And being that I was with the Badger hockey program for, a couple seasons working with Tony Granato, and being able to see, Rob Granato step into new roles and Cami go to the Kraken, and now Cami's with the Canucks, obviously, just the ties to the family I love. And she's a legend on the ice, and she is a trailblazer in terms of women in the game and in the league, and big time stick tap. She's also super nice and super smart, and somebody that I just have always really liked and looked up to is Carlin Baith. And I know that you guys have talked to her before, I believe, but when I first started covering college hockey, I think she was still pretty new to the Kings and the broadcast side, but my old boss used to be pretty involved with some of the Fox Sports West broadcasts and whatever. And he was like, who I think you would really like is this gal, Carlin Baith. She shoots a lot of her own stuff. She does a lot of the hockey, blogging. She kind of does the MMJ thing. She loves the same kind of music as you do. He was like, I would keep tabs on her if I were you. And I was like, okay. But then I did. And now we're friends and I love her, but I always did. So there's my answers.
She's a great one. She's awesome. She's incredible. We had so much fun having her on too. So, and then the final question is, do you have a Sidney Crosby story?
I don't have a Sidney Crosby story. I do have a jersey that I bought I guess I have they're not super cool stories, but I have the Penguins Winter Classic jersey. I think it's 2011 or 2012. It's the really cool blue ones, and I just loved that design, and so I knew I wanted one, and I was like, well, who am I going to get? And I was like, well, I'll get Sidney Crosby, get the C, So I have that. I love that. The other one I would say is my uncle, he's only a couple years older than me, but he has always been a hockey fan. He played junior hockey, whatever. He lives in Kentucky now, where there's no hockey, but he always loved the Penguins because Sidney Crosby was the guy, when he was the Connor McDavid of the time, and he's still Sidney Crosby, no disrespect. But he's got a bunch of Crosby stuff, and I have now my little cousin who's 4 skates around in his Crosby jersey. Every time they're sending pictures at the rink, he's in his little Crosby sweater. So, I like that too. Gives me good positive affiliations there.
Tell everybody where they can follow you on social media.
You could follow me on social media. On Twitter, I am at Piper Shaw TV. no underscores or anything cool. On Instagram, I'm at pip_Shaw. And I have a TikTok as well that has, I don't post a lot on there, and I also don't remember my handle. But if you search my name, I'll definitely come up. If you search Piper Shaw.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking some time after a road trip and a long plane ride and getting up and chatting with us and filling us in on all things Seattle Kraken.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, you guys. I hope I didn't talk your ears off too much.
No, you could not, never hear. We're always down for lots of hockey talk. So thanks. Thanks for coming over to our House of Hockey podcast and hanging out with us. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And in the meantime, you can follow us on social media. Just look for House of Hockey podcast. We'll be back next week.